Welcome back to Tools of Fighter Pilots, the show where we dissect and share the tools that elite performance use to face pressure in high-stake environments, and we try to transfer them to lifestyle, business, and sport. I am TC, and I won't be the host of this episode, but once again, I'm going to be helped today by my daughter, Allegra. Welcome to the show, Allegra.
Thank you for having me back. So let's just jump in straight with the questions that I have prepared for you. In the first episode of the season, you were very clear. The show is not just about fighter pilots, but highlighting the tools from elite performers that could be transferred to life, business, and sport. Looking back now, after 11 episodes, did this show stay aligned with the original intent that you had in mind?
I think we stayed aligned. We started with Jason Richardson, talking through many tools the fighter pilots use, and then we try to apply them, especially to business, but also we made some parallels with the sport and lifestyle. And then we had other guests still coming from the fighter pilot world, but also coming from the business. So we stayed aligned with this kind of concept of the mindset of fighter pilots and in general mindset of elite performers. And then we expanded because we had guests like Gustavo Rutes, a therapist, or Tamara Miles, an expert in positive psychology, and then also fighter pilot Billy Flynn, test pilot, and also Chris Bukosis, who from fighter pilot became an entrepreneur. So we had the surgeons and we looked at other elite performers. So we stayed lined up, but we expanded a lot.
Early in the season, a recurring idea was that most people don't fail because they lack talent, but because they lack structure under pressure. My dad's always mentioned that I need to have a structure and that I need to envision myself in the exam room to prepare and to not fall under pressure. So would you still say that structure is the main missing piece outside the fighter pilot world?
Structure is one of the main one, obviously, because we spoke about that a lot. Obviously, it's accompanied by what I call them the 5 fighter pilot non-negotiables, which are be on time, be prepared, structure and checklist, assertive communication, and control the controllables. So it's one of the main one because nowadays it's seen structure as something limiting. It's seen something that prison. But the reality is that structure and checklist, they represent clarity. They kind of unify team in an organization because now people are talking and speaking the same language.
So almost every episode touched on the topic of pressure in some way. If listeners had to learn something about pressure, what would that be?
We are talking a lot about high performance teams. They want to achieve, let's say, excellent results. And so they feel and they are targeted by daily pressure. So pressure is really not a cause of failure, but is really an amplifier of failure. In the moment that there is pressure, sometimes teams, they fall apart. And so we thought we have been using the fighter pilot's war because pressure is something that we work with daily and constantly in our flying activities, but also in preparing the flying activities. The graph that you are familiar with the Gaussian, where we have performance increasing with pressure increasing, there is a point that performance decreases rapidly as soon as you exceed a certain value of pressure. As fighter pilots, you are used to work in that kind of plateau, and we know that it cannot go beyond that for longer than certain time because otherwise it's a life-death stake. So what we learned there is that it's quite normal to live under pressure in high-stake environments. The important part is that we acknowledge it and then work around with certain tools, with teamwork, with delegation, with contribution, challenging people around you in order to achieve excellent results.
So what is the difference between having confidence through preparation and having a confident mindset?
So preparation is a common denominator of high performance teams. Not only high performance teams, is a common denominator of everybody that wants to achieve result and to want to pursue a certain goal. Why is preparation important for confidence? Because preparation together in one other of the non-negotiables allows you to avoid having surprises. So with preparation, you create and build a database of experience that allows you to see things happening in a different way, in a more confident way, because if it's something that you have studied already, then it's easy to face it.
Yeah.
I always give the example of the athletes that are preparing for an endurance race or for an Ironman, for example. What I tell them is like, you need to be prepared to deal with the variables. If you have reduced the variables during your preparation, if you have reduced the variables during the training, for example, I always say, you're going for 6 hours bike ride, change the tire. But I don't have to change the tire because I don't have any flat tire. Yes, but what if it happens during the race?
What if?
Yes, so preparation allows to reduce the number of what ifs, and so you can face challenges in a more confident way.
Okay, perfect. So you often say that discipline creates freedom and not limitation. After dedicating multiple episodes to your checklist, standards, and routines, what is the most common misuse, in your opinion, of discipline that you see outside of aviation?
I think that some people see discipline as rigidity, copying without understanding intent. In reality, discipline is following checklists, is following standards that are there in an organization to create clarity, not to create confusion. And so people following this checklist can be part and can be aligned with their meaning and their purpose.
Okay, great. So debriefing is one of the strongest tools discussed in this season. Why do people resist debrief so strongly? Not just in your world, but in businesses and so on, even when they intellectually understand the value of debriefs?
Jason Richardson has the right word because it's hard. Debriefing, it's hard. Showing our weaknesses, it's hard. Talking about our mistakes, it's hard. So debriefing is one of those tools that at the end of an activity, at the end of a quarter, at the end of an year, is fundamental to understand the mistakes that we did from leaders to team players, the corrective actions that we need to put into place, and then putting them into place. And to do so, as a leader, you can create a safe space for people to debrief so that the team players can bring their knowledge, can bring their contribution much more than if in a place there is a blaming culture, this is not going to happen. So to the question, why debriefing is difficult? Because it's hard.
There is one idea that comes back repeatedly, which is controlling what can be controlled. So why is that so simple to say, yet so difficult to practice?
Control the controllable is a very stoic principle that I like to always bring up in my discussions. But the reality is only when you are able to control internally the things that you have available, this is when you're going to succeed. I'll give you an example, and there is the storytelling from fighter pilots about this. And because our work cycle is very quick and deep, with briefing, execution, and debriefing, and sometimes it happens in 2 hours. We have an exposure to this kind of concept much more than, I would say, any other endeavor. So controlling the controllable, the story is you cannot control the weather. You don't have any control on the weather when you are on the airplanes. You are in control only of the aircraft that you have, the skills that you have learned, and the fuel that you have. And in this way, you don't have an emotional attachment to things that can go wrong because you are in control of
the things that you can prepare for.
Exactly. So once again, back to preparation, building that database that will allow you to face variables out of your practices will allow you to control much better the outcome of the mission, the outcome of your activity.
Right, so this show is built on transferability. After 11 episodes, which tool proved to be the most transferable across the professions, the lifestyles, and levels of performance, do you think?
When we started the show, as I said before, we wanted to highlight transferable tools. So I coded the non-negotiables. We have been speaking about the briefing. We are speaking about delegation with Jim Cook, with Jason Richardson. We have been speaking about, once again, the fighter pilot mindset in general. So things that they work quite well in, let's say, in the civilian world, in the world that people have their endeavors, but also in sport, but also in your lifestyle, are one of these principles is the preparation. And obviously, a cycle that goes through briefing, execution, and debriefing is a cycle that is pretty effective. Before the briefing, there is also the brainstorming. Okay, when the ideas are confronted, we didn't really speak about that in this season, so that could be a topic of the next season. And then the planning for the mission itself. So this cycle that we use every day as fighter pilots is one of those crucial ones that can be passed on. Also because, as like Christian Bukowskis like to say, we have a flawless execution as fighter pilots, which doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes. It means that we are trying. It means that we are analyzing what we are doing. We are finding the corrective actions, and then we put them into place. Okay, we discussed already about this in the past, but most accidents in aviation happens in the military world. Why? Because it's a high-stake environment, okay? But we are the best in understanding how flight safety and correcting our mistakes is crucial, and we are pretty good in understanding how to do that, because with that we can really improve, and it happens quickly.
Exactly. So as the season progressed, the conversations, I noticed that the conversations became more humans. You talked about fear, limits, fatigue, and responsibility. So why was it important not to keep this show so technical?
To make things transferable, you don't have to look Hollywood type of pilot. I mean, you can in terms of attracting the attention, but then in terms of transferring what you want to say, you need it to look more human. So all the stories, they have a component of fear. Okay, when I was telling the story about being in Germany at low level and having to come back, and the controller wasn't giving us the altitude that we want, there is a component of fear, which is making these things more human and less technical. What worked there was control the controllable, controlling the airplane, controlling the fuel that I have, but also using a certain communication to communicate with the controller to manifest what I wanted in terms of what was my requirement. So effectively, being more human is what makes these tools available for everybody.
Yeah.
In the show, we had the surgeons that did this surgery 12,000 kilometers away, and they are talking about the fear and the concern about making mistakes, because, we are talking about life or death situation. The human component is really important.
So to the listeners that have followed this podcast since the beginning, what principles would you say that they should remember out of all the ones that you've talked about? Give me maybe the top one and then maybe top 5.
I think that anything you do, be prepared, is the most fundamental principle that I would say this podcast is giving to people. Firstly, because being prepared is reducing the variables. And nowadays, with the chronological level, the technology that is accompanying any activity that we are doing, if you don't know the methods, for example, if you don't know about AI, you're kind of cut off the business, you're kind of cut off any rewarding activity. So being prepared is crucial. Being prepared also because, as we discussed with Billy Flynn, the 5th generation fighter pilots, but the 5th generation entrepreneurs, they are exposed to so much pressure coming from the noise that comes from outside. It can be the social media, it can be their activities. Imagine a 5th gen fighter pilot on a F-35 is receiving so many inputs, as well as you as a student, you're receiving so many inputs. So you have a threshold of noise that you need to lower it. And if you are prepared for what you're doing next, this is going to lower the stress level that is given by this. Imagine a sportman, an elite sportman that is under the social media eye from the fans, so much pressure. Okay, so but if you are prepared for these things, then this is going to lower and is going to help you out to achieve excellent results. So We're always talking about high performance teams. We're always talking about the high stakes. Being prepared is what makes the difference sometimes from a normal entrepreneur to a high achiever.
Season 1 of Tools of the Fighter Pilot is coming to a close. Across 11 episodes, we didn't just hear you and your guests' stories for entertainment, but we extracted tools. Tools built in environments where mistakes are expensive, where time is limited and responsibility is a non-negotiable. What emerged episode after episode is something simple but not easy. High performance is not about intensity, it's about structure. It's about preparation before motivation and standards before confidence and responsibility before results. This season showed us that pressure is not the enemy. Pressure reveals what is already there, and what structure is missing, pressure exposes it. We learned that discipline is not restriction, but it's clarity. That checklists are not bureaucracy, they are respect for reality. And that debriefing is not about blame, it's about the lessons learned, it's correcting the mistakes, and it's putting those correct actions into practice. One of the strongest lessons of this season is that fighter pilots are not exceptional because they are fearless. They are effective because they prepare for fear. They build systems that function even when emotions rise and certainty disappears. And perhaps most importantly, season 1 reminded us that leadership starts before the mission. It starts with self-control, with ownership, with the willingness to look honestly at what worked and what didn't.
Tools of the Pilots is not about becoming a pilot. It's about adopting a mindset, a way of thinking that respects reality, limits, and responsibility. Season 2 will go further.
So, for the upcoming season 2, is there any topics and conversations that you're thinking of covering? Something new that you haven't covered in season 1 so far?
In season 2, we're going to have new guests, new high performers, not only coming from the fighter pilot world, that will share their tools in order to transfer them to lifestyle, business, and sports. Thank you for listening, and see you on season 2.